Number 11. And now we are in the last chapter of Parashas Ekev. Chapter 11 is basically the second paragraph of Kriyat Shema. So you see over here, he's saying Kriyat Shema v'hayayim shamoya. And in Kriyat Shema, we of course got the Avas Hashem. And also it's related to Eretz Yisrael. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us, keep my mitzvahs and you will stay on the land and the land will produce for you. Oh my gosh, you're going to get all the rain you need for your flocks and for your produce. But if not, Hashem's going to throw you out. So all that's in Perek Yud Aleph of Devarim, Parashas Ekev, which is talking about Kriyat Shema, the second paragraph. If you will surely listen to the mitzvahs that I am commanding you today, then I will give you rain in its season. You will flourish, you will be extremely successful, and if not, Haz v'Shalom, I have to throw you out the land. So all that's in Perek Yud Aleph, chapter date, or teddy. I imagine a teddy, T is 1, E doesn't count because it's a vowel, D is 1 downstroke, so teddy, 2 Ds don't count because only you count one of them, remember? So teddy is 11, date is also 11. So I imagine a teddy made of dates, okay? A teddy made of dates, and I see the teddy saying the second paragraph of Shema. Can you see Teddy saying the second paragraph of Shema? Date, Teddy, 11, date, 11, Teddy, date. So he's saying the Kriyat Shema, second paragraph in chapter 11 of Devarim, Parashas Ekev. Now we're ready to enter Parashas Re'eh. Moshe Rabbeinu was telling us in chapter 11, also Teddy, but we're now in Parashas Re'eh. When you enter the Eretz Yisrael, you'll go to Har Gerizim and Har Eval, and over there, the curses will be on Har Eval, the blessings will be announced on Har Gerizim. So Moshe Rabbeinu is telling us, you are a blessed nation. You are a nation that has a choice to either behave in a way that will bring blessing or Has v'Shalom, curse. Now he tells us that we are to go as soon as we arrive into Eretz Yisrael to Har Eval and Har Gerizim, and there we were given the blessings and the curses and the reminder of the Taryag mitzvahs. We are being told, when you enter Eretz Yisrael, you will build a Mizbeach on Har Eval, and that's where the curses will be announced, and the blessings on Har Gerizim opposite Har Eval, and the Leviim will have the Aaron in the middle. As you can see, the Leviim carrying the Aaron there in the middle, and half of the Shvatim of Bnei Israel are on Har Gerizim, and half of the Shvatim on Har Eval. Har Gerizim is the bracha, Har Eval is the klala. So how will I remember this? Is in chapter 11. I imagine chapter 11, a teddy on top of Har Gerizim, another teddy on top of Har Eval. The one on Har Gerizim is smiling because he's giving out blessings, and the one on Har Eval looks angry and frowning, angry, really upset, and he's telling us the curses that will come upon us, Has v'Shalom, if we are disobedient. So Teddy, chapter 11. We're now up to chapter 12. A lot is going on in chapter 12. It's not one theme. There are 18 mitzvahs in chapter 12 of Parashas Re'eh. And just to give you a sampling of what's going on, one of the first mitzvahs that are mentioned there is the destruction of all of Avodah Zarah. Destroy all of Avodah Zarah. That's a mitzvah d'oraisa. That's that picture here. You can see this little man smashing an Avodah Zarah with this mallet, this enormous hammer. Moving on, the mitzvah of Bikurim. Yes, a Kohen is not allowed to eat Bikurim outside of Yerushalayim. So you see the Kohen, naughty man, he's eating grapes, one of the 7 Zayin minim that you bring for Bikurim, should not be eating it outside Yerushalayim. You also have the mitzvah of Shechita, and also the mitzvah of don't eat from Eva min Achai. Don't eat from a limb of a living animal while it's still alive. So these are 4 of the mitzvahs. There are a lot of mitzvahs which are related to each one of them, but these are in chapter 12. So how will I remember chapter 12? Tin is 12. How will I remember 18 mitzvahs in chapter 12? So I imagine I see a tin with 18 ingredients, and each one of those is one of the mitzvahs that are listed in chapter 12. Tin, 18 mitzvahs on the tin. Tin, 18 mitzvahs written on the ingredients in chapter 12, tin. Chapter 13, we're still in Parashas Re'eh. Chapter 13 has basically 3 things going on. Number 1 is a Navi Sheker, and missionaries, a masis, and number 3 is an ir hanidachas. So a navi sheker, a masis, and ir hanidachas. Those are the 3 categories, if you want to call them that, in chapter 13. You've got the halachas of a navi sheker, and not to listen to, and not to be afraid to kill him, and how he's killed. And the missionaries, there are 6 mitzvahs related to a masis, a missionary. A masis, don't be one, don't love him, don't stop hating him. We have to be done lahav chayv, don't be done lahav schus, and don't even try saving his life if his life is ever in danger. There's 6 mitzvahs just about a masis, a missionary. And one of them is don't stop hating him. You have a mitzvah to hate a missionary. Amazing. You also have the mitzvahs of Ir Hanidachas. An Ir Hanidachas is a city where the majority of the Jews were persuaded by at least 2 Yidden to serve Avodah Zarah. And the mitzvahs of Ir Hanidachas is you have to destroy that city, you actually burn it. You're never allowed to rebuild it, and you're not allowed to have any hana, any benefit whatsoever from an Ir Hanidachas, a city that was destroyed because of Avodah Zarah. So that's all in chapter 13. How will I remember this in chapter 13? So just in my personal city story, it's 13 rhymes with tummy. So I imagine that the Eidim bring these 2 people who've been serving Avodah Zarah, and the Eidim are jumping on top of the tummy and saying, this is what we saw them do as their new Avodah Zarah. That they would jump on top of the tummy of their Avodah Zarah, and the name of their new religion is Tammyism. Tammyism. And they've been practicing Tammyism. They were persuading Jews to follow Tammyism. Tammy 13. So in chapter 13 is Navi Sheker, a masis, and Ir Hanidachas. Tammyism. Okay, in chapter 14, we're still in Re'eh. Chapter 14 is basically the forbidden animals and tweets, as in birdies, and creepy crawlies that we're forbidden to eat. This, you will recall, has been listed in chapter 11. In chapter 11 in Vayikra. Now, many of those mitzvahs are found again, and a few repetitions and a few extras in this parasha, chapter 14 of Parashas Re'eh. So, for example, we're first told, Bani matem Lashem Elokechem, you are my children. HaKadosh Baruch Hu reminds us, you are my children. Whether or not you keep my mitzvahs, you're still my child. You are still my children. No matter how bad a child behaves, it doesn't change the facts that this child's father is his father. That's permanent. It's not dependent on the child's behavior, whether the father is the father or no longer the father. The father's always the father. So Hashem is telling us, I want you to know I love you so much. Bani matem l'Hashem Elokechem. You are forever my children. And that's number 1. Number 2, don't overmourn for a dead person. The idol worshippers used to cut their heads with swords and with knives and to show their mourning. Sometimes they would pull out their hair. So those are 2 averos we're not allowed to do, which was really associated with Avodah Zarah. But the rest of chapter 14 is all about forbidden animals. So in this picture you've got a reminder of the 2 simanim that you need for a kosher animal: split hooves and choose the cud. Choose the cud, in the case of the cow, has 4 stomachs. That's why you got number 4 on a stomach. That he would chew his grass into a ball, then swallow it, and then regurgitate it, which is a kind word for it coming back up into his mouth. And then he would chew it some more, and it would go back down into the second stomach. And this would continue. So the 2 signs of a kosher animal and kosher fish must have scales and removable fins. And then you've got various description of forbidden birdies, including vultures and eagles and owls and creepy crawlies. And then you've got flying creepy crawlies and water creepy crawlies and land creepy crawlies. All that's in chapter 14. How will we remember its entire? Tire is 14. So in my funny story, I imagine a waiter bringing, instead of a tray, he has a tire. And sticking out of the tire is the head of a pig. And sticking out the mouth of the pig is a swordfish. And at the end of the spiky nose of the swordfish is the head of a vulture. And if you don't know what that looks like, to put the head of an owl. So all it is the waiter is going around proudly offering a pig's head with the swordfish face sticking out with a sword at the end of its mouth, and, well, it's a beak really, as a nose. And then at the end of that it's sticking through the head of either a vulture or an owl or an eagle, any forbidden bird of prey. And that's my funny story. So he's delivering this on a tire in chapter 14 in Parshas Re'eh. We are now up to chapter 15, still in Parshas Re'eh. Goes with tail. Chapter 15 is tail. So in chapter 15 essentially are the laws of Shemitah, the laws of Tzedakah, and an Eved Ivri, and also the laws of firstborn animals. There's 4 items going on over there, but depicted in this picture you have the mitzvah of giving tzedakah. You're also not allowed to refuse to give tzedakah. And number 2, the next part of the picture shows you various malachas of Shemitah. So you're not allowed to prune the grapevines. You're not allowed to cut trees or plant trees. You have to tear up any loans that you have of money that you loaned. You actually have to cancel all loans before Shemitah. In the Shemitah year, you're not allowed to plow the ground or plant seeds. Here's plowing, here's planting seeds, and here's harvesting. So all the laws of Shemitah are contained in this parak. Also, Ived Ivri, and the laws of Bechor Behema, of a firstborn animal, and you're not allowed to do malacha with animals that have been designated for kodshim. So all that is in Parshas Re'eh, chapter 15. How will I remember chapter 15, tail? So I imagine a field that instead of stalks of grain, I see lots of tails sticking out vertically out of the ground, and some of them are shooting coins out of the tail to remind me of tzedakah. But the tail shooting out of the ground reminds me of Shemitah, because Shemitah is, of course, all the laws that have to do with the fields and harvesting your crops on the 7th year. So that's my funny story for Parshas Re'eh, chapter 15. We're now in Re'eh, chapter 16. In chapter 16 is quite easy, is the reminder to keep the 3 festivals, the 3 holidays of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. So there are a few mitzvahs of Pesach that are reminded, including don't eat chametz before the 6th hour, and also don't leave over any meat from the Korban Pesach till dawn. Count Sphira is also in this parak, and the mitzvah of Shavuos and the mitzvah of Sukkot, in that order. Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, and of course to be happy on your Hag. V'samachta b'chagecha is in this parak. V'samachta b'chagecha is in chapter 16. Chapter 16. Be happy on Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Okay, so those are the main points, and you see in this picture the Beis HaMikdash, because it's a mitzvah on Nisan, Sivan and Tammuz. Nisan for Pesach, Sivan for Shavuos, and Tishrei for Sukkot, to go to Eretz Yisrael, and there to the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. And that is the mitzvah of Shalosh Regalim. On those 3 times you go by foot festivals, you go by foot to Yerushalayim and celebrate Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. How will you remember? This is in chapter 16. So 16 is Tish or Dish. And what I imagine is that the Olei Haregel, all the millions of Jews who are walking by foot to Yerushalayim, you remember in the picture you can see that long line, they're walking to Yerushalayim. I imagine there's this long smorgasbord, long table, dish, and there's a long table with lots of dishes of lots of food and carvings of different types of meat. I mean, it's a gorgeous, delicious smorgasbord of every imaginable meat and fish, and don't eat the 2 together, you have to wash your mouth in between, but it's so delicious. And this is just a foretaste before you actually get to the real party of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot in Yerushalayim. This is just a foretaste, it's a little taste of what's coming. So all this is on this long smorgasbord on lots of long tishes and lots of dishes on top of dish is 16. So that will remind me of Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Okay, now we enter Parshas Shoftim, and we're still in chapter 16. So 16 spills over from Re'eh into Shoftim, but in chapter 16 of Shoftim, what you have in this picture are 3 types of Beis Din. You've got a Beis Din of 3 judges, 23 or 71. Those are 3 possibilities. So the laws of Shoftim is in chapter 16, and then is a continuation in chapter 16. You'll see some of the Avodah Zarah laws of an Asherah tree. You're not allowed to plant a tree near the Mizbeach or anywhere in the courtyard of the Har HaBayis of the Beis HaMikdash, and don't bow on an Evan Muskis, or don't bow down to a pillar, where the Avodah Zarah usually typically is on top of the pillar. So these are the laws which are in chapter 16, Tish. So how will I remember 16 Tish or Dish? So I imagine the Beis Din of the Sanhedrin checking the kashrus of food on a dish, which is on a tish. Dish is on a tish. Tish is a table. So I see them checking the food, and then right out of the middle of the dish comes an Asherah tree. Can you see that in your mind's eye? An Asherah tree grows out of the middle of the dish, and hanging from the Asherah tree are these pillars and Avodah Zarah, like on a kind of a tree where you got things hanging from the branches. So I see Avodah Zarah, little idols, hanging from the tree as it comes out of the dish. So the Sanhedrin, Beis Din, are checking the dish, tree comes out the middle. You probably never saw that happen before, so I'm guessing your brain now has to create its own brand new file just for this image. You can come up with your own better image. This is one that works for myself. Dish, Tish, in Parshas Shoftim, Sanhedrin, and Avodah Zarah. Asherah tree, and don't bow down to Avodah Zarah. So now we're into chapter 17 of Parshas Shoftim, the very famous chapter. Contained here are laws of idol worship, Avodah Zarah, and the laws of a Jewish king. So those are the two basic areas. In this particular picture, you can see someone serving Avodah Zarah. In this case, they're serving the sun, moon, and stars. That is a warning in this parsha, chapter 17 of Shoftim, not to bow down to any of the celestial beings, not the sun, not the moon, not the stars, not anything in the Bria, nothing in creation. Next, you see the mitzvah to listen to the Sanhedrin, listen to the Hachamim throughout all the generations. In every generation, listen to the heads of Klal Yisrael, of the Gedolim of Klal Yisrael. The next mitzvah you see, the little arrow points down to don't go to the left or the right. Don't deviate from the words of the Sanhedrin, of the Shofet who would live in that time, the Gedolim or the Gadol Hador of that generation. You listen and don't deviate. And the next one points to the laws of a Melech. Here's your Melech in the middle of the card. Down here you see the Melech. It's a mitzvah to anoint a Jewish king. He's anointed by the Navi. And then there are three things he's not allowed to have too much of. Lo yarbelei noshim, don't have too many wives, not more than 18. Then you don't have too much money and don't have too many horses. They might be tempted to go back to Mitzrayim, which is a separate issa. Don't go back to Mitzrayim once you're living in Eretz Yisrael. So these are three mitzvahs of not having too much of, not too many wives, not too much money, not too many horses. Don't go back to Mitzrayim, anoint for a king. Also in this particular chapter is the mitzvah for a king to write his own Sefer Torah. So in addition to the Sefer Torah that he has to write for himself, which every male Jew has that obligation, a Jewish king has an additional mitzvah to write a second Sefer Torah, which that particular one he has to take with him wherever he goes. He actually wore it all the time. Only place he couldn't wear it, of course, was the bathroom, taking a shower, entering the mikveh. Otherwise, he had to wear going to war, speaking to people, sitting down, standing up, walking. He wore a Sefer Torah on his chest. Some say it was strapped to his arm, wherever he went. So these are the two basic ideas of Avodah Zarah and the laws of a Jewish king, all in chapter 17. How will we remember chapter 17? Dog, duck, all those are 17. So I imagine seeing a dog, DG, that's 17, a dog being stoned to death for worshipping a duck. Duck is also 17. So the dog was bowing down to a duck, and therefore he was stoned to death for serving Avodah Zarah. So that's my silly story for remembering that. And what I see is a king jump on top of the dog while it's being stoned and ride on it all the way to Mitzrayim, which he's not allowed to do, by the way. But that's just my silly story. Since your brain never heard or saw anything like that in your life, your brain actually has to create its own file for it, and that's the way your memory works, by creating something that's so unusual and associate it to the information in that chapter. So if you know dog is 17, and now you have a dog being stoned for bowing to a quack, a ducky duck, and then a king jumping on top of the dog before he's killed and riding on the dog to Mitzrayim. You never heard or saw that before, and therefore you got a file that contains the basic information in chapter 17 of Parshas Shoftim in Chumash Devarim. So now we're up to chapter 18, Parshas Shoftim, and you can see on this card, you've got the Leviim, the two basic laws of Leviim in this parsha, in this perek, is that a Levi gets no nachala, no inheritance in Eretz Yisrael. So in one of these pictures you see the Levi with a contract where it says no inheritance, and the other one says biza, that's no spoils. There's an X, a red X going through a bag of spoils of gold, silver, coins, etc., where these are the two mitzvahs a Levi doesn't have. He doesn't own land in Eretz Yisrael, and he gets no share in the spoils of war. Why? He's got to be completely devoted to the Torah, and if we start giving him spoils, he'll be distracted. Instead, all the money he gets comes from the agricultural tithes, Ma'aser Rishon. That the Jewish farmers in that time, it was almost entirely agricultural. There's almost no industry. For the most part, it was agricultural. So a tremendous amount of influx of produce came in the terms of Ma'aser Rishon for the Levi. So that's how he was supported. So he completely devoted to Chinuch, completely devoted to Avodas Hashem. So the laws of Levium are there. You see the blue arrow points now to the different gifts that were given to the Levium and the Kohanim. So for example, you've got the Zroya, the L'chaim, and the Keva. The Zroya was the foreleg of each animal that was given to the Kohen. L'chaim are the two cheeks on both sides of the face, and the Keva was the stomach. Those are gifts to the Kohen. And then there's Truma Gedola, which is also a gift to the Kohen. That's 1/50th of the crop. And Reishis Hagez, as you can see the picture, you see the shearings of wool from the sheep was also a gift to the Kohanim. Going down the next arrow, you'll see the Leviim are guarding the Beis HaMikdash. In this particular picture, it's the Mishkan, but the Leviim essentially had three jobs, and they are actually listed in this perek. They had to sing during the Karbanos. Number two, they had to guard all the gates of the Beis HaMikdash. And it was a 24-hour, 365, 120. They had to guard the Beis HaMikdash all year round, every hour of the day. Of course, they did it in shifts, known as mishmaros. So the Leviim were guards on the outside of the Beis HaMikdash, and Kohanim were guards on three places inside the Beis HaMikdash. So the Leviim, they sang, and they played instruments, they opened and closed the doors, and they guarded the Beis HaMikdash. Those were the jobs of the Leviim. And the last part of the parsha, you see the arrow now points to different types of avodah zarah. So in one picture you see a wizard with a crystal ball in his hands, and in the speech bubble he's saying, "Come here, I'll tell you the future." So that's a kaisem. Actually, the kaisem was one who used the crystal ball, and Ma'ayin was one who would read the Times and say, not the New York Times. He would read the Times based on astrology and say that now's a good time for this, now's not a good time for this. So these are all different types of magic. Here you actually have a real magician. Then you've got the Oiv and Yidoni. The Yidoni was someone who used a bone of a bird known as Yadua, that was the name of the bone, of the bird that was placed in his mouth. Then he went into some sort of epileptic fit, burning incense and waving a myrtle branch, and then pretending that he's hearing noises or voices from the ground, or in the case of Oiv, hearing voices come from under his armpits. Excuse me. And these were different types of crazy avodah zarah that existed in those times. And this particular perek Yud Ches, is warning against these people. There are other mitzvahs in the perek which include Dor Shel HaMesim, don't go trying to communicate with the dead, like sleeping in cemeteries at night, not a good idea. Fasting and then sleeping in cemeteries and leaving notes under your pillow with a question to dead people to answer in a dream. All these things are absolutely forbidden. And in the same perek it says, Tamim tiyeh Hashem Elokecha. Instead be a tam. Don't speculate the future. Accept whatever happens to you with tamimus, with complete emunah. And then you will be with Hashem. Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha, says Rashi, you'll be with Hashem and his chilek. You'll be in his portion. You're going to enjoy life. But all these other people, they're constantly filled with anxiety because they're worrying about the future, which you cannot control. And therefore don't worry about something you can't control. Pointless. So the Torah is there to protect us emotionally, psychologically, and we're getting off the subject. But essentially you've got these mitzvahs contained in this perek. How are we going to remember Perek Yud Ches has these four basic items: the laws of Levium and the gifts to the Kohanim, the Mishmaros and the Avodah Zarah, laws of Avodah Zarah. So essentially I have in my mind, dove, that's 18. I imagine this dove, I think you pronounce it as dove in America. I see this dove, tweet, tweet, going in the air, and he's dropping the Levium at their guard posts around the Beis HaMikdash, the four corners on the outside, on the inside, and then he's dropping some of the Kohanim in their guard posts on the inside of the Beis HaMikdash, and finally you see this dove dropping a third item, which is lots of gift wrap boxes. Can you see the gift wrap boxes in your mind? See, those are the gifts of the Kohanim and the Levium. So those are known as Matnas Kahuna, the gifts given to the Kohanim. So I see this one sticking out of the boxes, and you hear incantations and promises of the future. Maybe I would see a crystal ball flying out of one of the packages. So, but the idea is you've got three things going on over here. The dove dropping the Levium, dove dropping the Kohanim, and dove dropping the gift wrap boxes, and some of those boxes you see a crystal ball fly out, another one a magic wand stick out. So that remind me of the basic contents of chapter Dov 18. Ready for 19. Chapter 19. So in the picture you actually see the three cities of refuge, Kadesh, Shechem, and Hebron. They were equidistant. That means they were of equal distance between each other. And the other ones, which was in Golan, and also in Ramot and Betzer. These are the three in the territories of Ruvain, Gad, and Menashe, and my simon for that is Ragman. Remember? Okay. So then these are the six that are in Eretz Yisrael and Eva Yardin. And then the next picture, you always see the blue arrow will point you where to go next. Shows you a picture of someone running away. He's Maka Nefesh B'Shogeg. He accidentally hit someone and killed him. And he's going to an Ari Miklat. So you see the stick there with the sign for the Ari Miklat. And then the last one is an aid. So he's an aid Echad. Who's one aid, he's Pasal Eidus, and that's in front of a Beis Din. The Sanhedrin would be 23 or 71, but this was a regular Beis Din of 3. So these pictures schlep it all in. So how will I remember Yud Tes is tub? So I imagine that anyone who killed by accident has to jump in a tub and run with the feet sticking through holes in the floor of the tub, a little bit like Flintstones, and run to the nearest Ari Miklat. So you can see anyone who's running inside a tub, you know that they were Makah Nefesh B'Shogeg. By accident, they killed someone. So all that's in tub. So I see him running away. That will remind me of what's going on, for the most part, in chapter 19, tub.